and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We're back with another innovator interview, and this time we're talking about reforestation, which is a very hot topic as more and more companies and people are taking steps to plant trees to offset their environmental impact. Our guest today is Matt Hill, the Chief Environmental Evangelist at One Tree Planted, one of the oldest and largest tree planting nonprofits. They have planted more than 40 million trees in 43 countries around the world and offer easy options to plant in your preferred region for just $1 per tree. So regardless of where you want to plant, they offer a reforestation project option. You'll also be able to deduct your tree planting donation from your taxes. And one really notable project that I was appreciated this year is that they replanted about 1.2 million trees to restore California forests that were burned by recent wildfires, 6 different places in the state. So you can check out One Tree Planted at onetreeplanted.org. That's all one word, onetreeplanted.org. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you today?
I'm great and super happy to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And we've had some conversations offline about various ways that Earth911 and some other companies that I work with might get involved with tree planting. But tell us how One Tree Planted came to be, and how'd you go from planting 50,000 trees in 2015 to 27 million this year?
Sure. So I was running eco products for Canada. So they are the largest manufacturer of sustainable food packaging. So those disposable water, beer cups, coffee cups that you buy, they were manufacturing sustainable food packaging. And I got them into the Winter Olympics in Vancouver because they had a mandate to use green packaging. Right. So then the manufacturer asked me to run Canada for them. So I did. So every time I was in with brands, trying to do the right thing, but they saw the price point. So a regular coffee cup might cost 4 cents. A compostable one cost 6 cents. It was 2 cents more. They'd be up in arms like, what? It's so much more expensive. We can't do it, but we wish we could do more. I would always tell companies, you can do more, plant trees. People don't realize how important trees are to the environment. And I would talk about air quality, water quality, creation of jobs, carbon, et cetera. And a big brand said, Matt, that's a great idea. You should start that. Because I thought, there's a lot of great companies out there that want to help the environment. There's individuals that want to help the environment, but I found that they often felt paralyzed. That was too big of a challenge for them by themselves. And then if they did and they looked out there, there are a lot of great organizations doing incredible work, but they really takes a lot of time to find them. And when you found them, I found that their websites were dated, way too technical, and then people became paralyzed. So I said, let me create One Tree Planted, which really makes it easy for people to help the environment. When you plant a tree, it's tangible, right. Doing it for $1. So I did a lot of research to find out, can you really plant a tree for $1? Who's doing what? Right. And yes, when I was going out there, speaking to everybody who's planting trees out there, from Cal Fire to the Forest Service to British Columbia Ministry of Forestry, you name it, I was calling. They all thought I was a quack, but I was really absorbing as much information about this space as I could. And I just tried to reposition it, making it simple for people to understand and see how it's having a positive impact. So sorry to be long-winded, but it went from running a sustainable food packaging company, got acquired. I didn't kind of agree with the way it was going, different corporate culture. And I said, let me start this nonprofit that's really making it easy for people and businesses to do more.
So one of the good news stories in the environmental movement is that there are actually more trees than there were in 1970, but that still hasn't prevented cutting down a lot of old growth forest as we did add more trees. How many trees does humanity need to replant in order to get back to, say, the forested area in 1950?
Well, they were saying that there was, 3 trillion trees and trillion tree initiative. At the end of the day, I said, putting in, an extra tree today or a couple more trees, it's making a difference no matter what. So, I try not get caught up in too much of what's going on. I know there's incredible work that's needed to be done. Is it 1 billion? Is it 1 trillion? But, at the end of the day, it's important that whatever number it is, that is being done right. Like that's the big thing to One Tree Planted. So I can't, would love to help in whatever initiatives, so there's the Trillion Tree Initiative. We're a part of that, and we're just trying to make sure that people are aware of these great projects that need support and how it's getting done. And, what are the costs involved? And a lot of times it needs multiple collaborators to make sure that this project can kind of get off the ground and get going.
Well, one of the things that came out of the COP26 meeting in Glasgow, which just recently ended, was a global pact to end deforestation. That, of course, is changing a lot of our conversations about our relationship with nature and its role in our economy. Has that movement resulted in what you would describe as more willingness to do reforestation projects? Is it making countries come to your organization and offering space to plant trees, for instance?
100%. I think it's brought a lot of visibility. I think, I got lucky in the timing, planting the seeds, in 2014 when I started this, trying to understand the lay of the land and really be in a good position because, it's been, a lot of talk right now for these commitments. And when they're Googling, they're finding us and they're reaching out, trying to figure out how they could get involved, whether it's businesses, individuals, celebrities, and then countries. And use Canada as the example. A couple of years ago, Canada made their commitment to plant 2 billion trees. And, they've reached out to us to help them, with projects. The fact that we can plant, throughout Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part that I think One Tree Planted's been really good at is the storytelling behind it. So you could inspire Canadians to be involved, bring members of parliament out to each of the different provinces, get their hands in the dirt and realize the important work that is being done and how it helps beyond just this tree number. So yes, countries are speaking to us. But it's slow moving. So to me, a big part of our growth, and you asked that question, 50,000 trees, up to, I think we'll be over 40 million trees just this year in 2021 alone, is showing action, getting out there. I'd rather put 20,000 trees in the ground, this week, next week, and show that it's working, what's not working so well, what can we do better, which projects have the ability to scale. So that's the way that, I really keep my head down, know what we can do as a team. And so, yes, I'm always open to speaking to anybody that wants to call. And I use the word, I like to enlighten them and talk about the realities. And let's just get it done now versus, talking about big commitments, big numbers.
Practical facts are pretty effective in the middle of a crisis, that's for sure. Now, how would you describe where reforestation fits in the overall solution to the climate crisis? Some people criticize tree planting as a kind of a misleading form of offset that encourages people to continue emitting CO2, but makes them feel good about doing it. What does One Tree Planted advise people to do in terms of thinking about their overall relationship with the environment as they plant trees?
Sure. So my first thing that I say is that you need to be doing things in a better way, a more sustainable way, using better materials, looking at the way that you go about business in a better way. That's the first part, right? So they can do as much as they possibly can do. And I think a lot of companies are looking at that. And there's many different spectrums that I'm far from the expert, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end, then they want to plant trees. And depending on the region and the type of tree, has a carbon amount. But, I'm doing this because it's helping the local biodiversity. It's creating a job. It's helping with water quality. So we can look at these metrics presented to them in an easy to digest format. So it's not the magic bullet, but it definitely helps. And then, we want to make sure and not go out quickly and hastily and plant X amount of trees, let's just say for a brand, and then, go back a year later or 3 years later and find that all that works for naught, right? Because nothing survived and you didn't have buy-in or whatever. So, we'd rather be doing it the right way is what I say. So to answer your question, mm-hmm. I think that companies just need to be looking at better materials that they're using. What are they using for their fleet? What are they using for, their corporate headquarters? Where are they manufacturing? So there's a lot of elements that, it's not my role to tell them, but I know they're looking at it and they're coming to us to making sure that, hey, we want to plant a tree, whether they want to tie it into their sustainable development goals or their carbon numbers or employee engagement or acquisition of a new customer. Let's just say, buy this product and we'll plant a tree for you. And I feel that, when they do it that way, it's connecting because we all want to help the environment. Businesses, consumers are willing to change, brands to companies that are doing more for the environment. But It's not just a big statement that one day and then tomorrow it's forgotten. I feel myself and I tell the brands that you need to create longevity to this and bring the consumer along for the journey to understand how you guys, everybody together, are making an impact.
Well, so the consumer is also thinking about this potentially as offsetting carbon or simply restoring the environment. What is your personal practice in terms of, let's say you're flying across the country, it emits a certain amount, it's several hundred pounds of CO2. Do you offset all of it, 2 times all of it, 5 times all of it in order to have that be a carbon positive experience rather than a contributing to the warming?
So a couple of things that I could talk a lot
And I'm
about.
just asking for your opinion.
Yeah, my opinion, totally. So to me, carbon's an abstract number. Tons of market research looked at there. The average consumer out there that's buying a product doesn't understand what 20 tons is, 1 ton. Where's it coming from? And I always say the consumption of stuff. There's a lot of elements that kind of fall into that, right? And then they get confused. People are paralyzed. But, when they say, hey, you're buying this, or you took a flight and we're planting a tree for you for this flight, they get it and learn about the project, right? So then people are curious. They'll read about project, and I think that, hey, 20,000 trees were planted in this particular country, helping with farmers, X amount of hectares restored, etc. So no, I don't consider it, and I don't say it's a carbon offset. I said it's definitely taking carbon from the atmosphere, but it has a lot of other positive elements. When you get into the carbon offset, I think that then you have to be a lot more, call it certainty. So you have to create the project as certified, and there's a process to set it up. You have to monitor the project for X amount of years because you're making this grand calculation over many years, call it 40 years. And are these trees surviving? And then you have people that are going to go in and audit the site for the duration of this time to making sure it isn't lost in year 10 or X, Y, and Z. So again, a lot of factors that come into it. Where I just say one tree planted, its core is planting trees successfully the right way, right? And it has a lot of co-benefits to it. And yes, I take just the average carbon from a tree, right? And we use that. But now more and more companies are trying to, claiming their carbon neutrality goals. These projects do need to be certified. So you have Gold Standard and Verra. And I think there's going to be new emerging, certification bodies. I think with the technology that's out there, we can be more efficient, faster, et cetera. But, we're evolving One Tree Planted, and we're looking at these opportunities that can help for the company's carbon neutrality goals and having multiple benefits beyond just that.
Well, obviously you're evolving. You're doing 60 times as many plantings a year annually. Now, let's talk about, you mentioned auditing. How does One Tree Planted audit and report the state of its trees to the supporters who paid for them?
Sure. So we have an incredible projects team here, and we have 2 people right now. They have their master's in forestry from Yale, one of the leading schools in forestry, and they're going to, a lot of the sites, and they fly the drones over the projects. They do a pre and a post, but the pre is to kind of analyze the landscape and see, what they're talking about on where the trees are going to be planted. But the post part is now we can monitor the tree planting, and it's so sophisticated. It can get down to the blade of grass between the drones and the satellite monitoring to kind of understand, what is happening. And we can look at the historical performance, and is it working? Do we need to replant some areas? Do we need to do a higher density of certain tree planting? Where are there biodiversity corridors that are connecting in terms of the objectives of some of these projects? And I also think it's great because when we present that back to the donor or somebody even considering it, it's not a 40-page report that's very technical. You can visually understand this landscape and where it's connected to, an ocean or a waterway or neighboring, critical spot. So what are we doing? We're using a lot of the remote monitoring sensing that's out there right now. We're testing a lot that's out there and kind of looking at best practices. We're sending our teams to the sites. And we also want to equip our partners on the ground with the right tools and not dictate to them that this is what we expect. We're like, hey, this is what British Columbia is doing over here. Have you thought about it this way? And we're actually giving the drones for free to them, training them on how to use it, because it allows us to get back data, fly it monthly, quarterly, whatever it might be. And it's kind of coming into our central hub that we can kind of understand, because we're in 43 countries and it's hard for us to be everywhere.
So part of your auditing is practicing forestry and then helping others practice forestry better.
Yeah, best practices, who are we to say? And this is one thing that people always say to me, they're in that region, they've been planting for decades, they know that area, they know the community buy-in, they know the proper tree species. And climate's changing. What are the types of trees we're planting now that are going to be able to the environment that's going to be 5 years from now?
Right.
And, when I go to a lot of these sites and I see them, they're testing things, they're telling me, and then it's a collaboration effort to understand, what do we need to do to make sure that this is going to be successful for everybody. So, again, like I said, I use the term here at One Tree Planted, continuous improvement, and we're just striving to always just get better and better. So the monitoring practices, I think, are getting better and better. I think there's a lot of great technologies coming out for monitoring protocols. And I think now, when you said with COP and going on, companies, brands, people want to plant, but they're skeptical, saying, how do I know my tree is being planted? And did it survive? And somebody said the term to me, it's not just planting a tree, it's growing a tree. And I think that's so true, right?
Yeah.
Easy to plant a tree, harder to grow a tree. So, what's going on over these 5 years? And One Tree Planted looks at 5 years of monitoring. And after 5 years, 3 to 5 years, we often find that the tree, is mature enough to be independent from, outgrowing the weeds and, not getting eaten by the deer. So
it's reached a viable stage. So if for instance, 10 years later, that forest burned, would you all replant? How would that work?
Yeah. So as a charity, I really strive to be at that 80%, 80-20 rule. So 80% goes to the ground, 20% to cover our operating costs to, do the storytelling, the monitoring, the team, et cetera. And, you could have a catastrophic failure. Like, we planted trees in Colorado and it snowed by a foot in June when it's not supposed to snow. And, what I say is Mother Nature. I can't control Mother Nature. So I just said, I planted 1 million trees and have that guarantee a catastrophic event could, bring us down. So we do our best, planting at the right time of the season, the rainy season, typically the spring. Professional tree planters are going out there, they know what they're doing. And we shoot for an 80% plus tree survivability. So what would happen if 50% of the trees, got lost? And I'll tell you a crazy, interesting story. But I was out in British Columbia, and they plant over 300 million trees a season, which is incredible.
Yeah.
They're probably the best in the world. So I do a lot of site visits, and I went with about 30 different people, a lot of specialists from all different types of spectrums, right? And some of them are entomologists. So there's this black army cutworm that came out. So the forest fire that was at this extreme level, for whatever reason, these moths are really attracted to that extreme heat because it was the biggest forest fire ever. They laid, their eggs in the ground. And then when the tree planters went out that season and planted millions of trees, they noticed when they're coming back, all these caterpillars were coming decimating the site. And it literally was 100% failure to the project. And so are we responsible for planting that? They said that this has only been cited 3 times ever in history, this type of experience. So there's a lot of new things that are changing right now. We're going in with the best intentions to do it right, but we're not replanting for what was lost because it's Mother Nature, and it's just, there's so many circumstances.
Okay. Now, look, those are the realities we're dealing with. And as you say, reality is changing.
Yeah.
Both as temperature ranges migrate north, it'll get hotter as you go further south, and as these new insect threats because of climate change, non-native species invading an area which has really decimated Western forests. You face a lot of challenges, but one of the accelerators that I see is that you just announced this partnership with the Bezos Earth Fund and World Resources International. You announced a $10 million matching fund. So somebody plants a tree, this organization will add a tree. You did that at COP26. How did that come about? And how is One Tree Planted going to contribute to the goal of planting 1 billion trees?
Well, a generous donation by the Bezos Earth Fund, close collaboration with us and the World Resource Institute. And, with Andrew Steer and in his heart, AFR 100, which is to help restore 100 million hectares throughout Africa. There was an RFP that went out in terms of projects on the ground that needed funding to help restore. I think in 2 weeks, there was over 3,000 applications that came in. One Tree Planted and the World Resource Institute, vetted through the applications, brought it to the top 100, presented at, COP 20 that we are going with. And, again, it's going to be what's working well, what's not working so well, what can we do better? How can we scale this program? So in a sense, this is a beta test that we're doing right now. And we were trying to, not only with the Bezos Earth Fund, he was trying to encourage other companies to get on board. And, in the announcement, Facebook and a few other companies have got on board. And then once we can kind of show, and that's my big takeaway too from COP, and that's always been from the beginning, is show action, show results, show that this is working, right? And then if we can have proof of concept, prove that this model is working, we believe that we can get $100, $200 million from other brands coming on board.
So let me ask this. Do you feel like COP26 did deliver action? What's your general assessment of what came out of Glasgow?
I think there was a lot of visibility, a lot of awareness that's bringing this more to the forefront. And I think that people are looking at how can we do this. So I think there was a lot of positives, and each year just gets better and better in terms of, actionable items that need to be done. And now that, I'm getting, call it more phone calls. I'm just making this up, like saying, hey, we've committed to be a part of this. Show us how this can be done. And, luckily we have 8-9 years now of experience of doing this and showing, here's some amazing projects. These are projects that have the ability to scale. And I'm telling you, I'm on phone calls all day long. Mm-hmm. And every company has different types of objectives in terms of what they're trying to do. I think being able to present it to them in simple terms, in terms that show that this can work, is the important part. So yes, I think COP was good. And after COP, I went to a conference and they were talking about two similar situations. And one's going to sit there and bitch and moan about it, and the other's innovated and mm-hmm. figured out a way to overcome this particular obstacle and is thriving. And that's the approach that I think we need to look at it, is let's just do this.
So how can our listeners get started with One Tree Planted? What do you suggest they do?
To me, it's never been about a donation saying, hey, we're a charity, please give us money. I'm sure it's more about, hey, here's incredible projects in Costa Rica or in Tanzania or in Australia. Here's how they're helping. This is the partner on the ground that's got 20 years experience, and this is what they're doing. These are the costs that are there, so that there's full transparency for them to say, hey, if I donate $20, this is what it's going to, and that they're along for the journey. To your listeners, what I'd say is there's a lot of things we can all do together. I always say, together, we're planting a forest. It's not on one particular person. It's not on one particular company or government. I think we all need to be pitching in here. And there's small little things you can do in your daily habits that will make a difference, right? So, my kids are vegetarian, but, if you can be vegetarian like Meatless Mondays, it starts to make a difference. And this is why, right? You can look at better modes of transportation with Zoom and the situation we're living in for the last 2 years, noticing that you can do a meeting over Zoom, right, versus jumping on a plane and going. But sometimes you have to jump on that plane and meet with the people because it does make a difference being there, but you can do less of it. So, my thing to the listeners is everything in moderation, right? Making these conscious efforts on things that I'm doing, buying locally, sure. Right? Using reusable bottles versus disposables, right? And all of a sudden now you're having this compound effect and people just get into habits of doing it this way versus the old thought.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
No, amazing. My pleasure. Really had a great time talking with you.
Thank you. We've been talking with Matt Hill, the Chief Environmental Evangelist at One Tree Planted. And you can check out One Tree Planted at onetreeplanted.org. That's all one word, onetreeplanted.org. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. We're always going to be back. We're not going to stop until this climate crisis is solved. And we hope you'll take a few minutes and share this podcast and others that we've done, as well as the Earth911 site with your friends. I'd also like to thank our team. We do a lot of hard work here at Earth911, but our audio editor, Doug Mackey, cleans up what I say, which is not the easiest job in the world. Thanks, Doug. Folks, we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.